acknowledge the Minister of Youth, Culture and Sport, the Honorable Owen Darrell, JP, and also the Speaker of the House, the Honorable Dennis Lister. Minister Darrell is now going to offer some comments.
Thank you, Mr. Denbrook. First of all, good evening, everyone. And I want to put a disclaimer out right now that I do have a very important meeting that I need to be at. It started at 5:30, but I did get special permission from the Premier of the country that I can come up and greet the audience. So I want to say thank you for all of you that came out to participate in this. I want to say thank you to the panelists from the three community clubs, Workmen's, PHC, and Somerset. Mr. Denbrook, thank you for hosting. Director, thank you for your leadership and all involved with the Department of Culture. This is actually a very important series, and although I will not be able to stay, I will be watching it probably later this evening on the recording and making some notes, because there have been conversations that I have had in multiple locations. Many of you will know that the club that I'm a part of, the Harrington Workmen's Club, also known as Devil Soul Club, has had quite a bit to do in the community over years. They've had their ups and their downs. I would consider right now one of their ups. So I have a little bit of knowledge about clubs and social clubs and some of the challenges they have. And I also have a brother who is the president of Devonshire Colts. And many of my friends have been involved in community clubs. So I want to say thank you to gentlemen on the stage for the work that you do. Thank you for your members for the work that they do. And thank you everyone for coming, and I'm sure that this will be a very enlightening event, and I will be at the next one, Madam Director. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. This evening we have Mr. Michael Trott, President of PHC Club. We have Dr. Waddell Tankard, who is a member of Somerset Cricket Club. And we also have Mr. Lorenzo Tucker, who is the president of Warwick Workmen's Club. Welcome, gentlemen. It's a pleasure to have you here this evening. Yeah, gentlemen, if you would like to share anything, any pertinent information or details on your clubs before we go any further, please feel free and in no particular order.
Yeah, go ahead. You want to start?
Sure, I'll start the evening. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge the Minister, Minister Owen Darrell, as well as the Speaker of the House, distinguished guests, fellow panelists, ladies and gentlemen. Let me thank the Department of Community and Cultural Affairs Director Dismont and her team for hosting this event. I think it is very timely. I recognize the importance of it. And so as a representative of Somerset Cricket Club, I'd like to share with you that our club has a history of 97 years of being actively involved in the broader community, serving both members of the Sandwich Parish as well as the broader community of Bermuda. When you talk about Somerset Cricket Club, you can look at the club's structural development in two phases. Beginning in 1902, as early as 1902, through to, let's say, the 1950s as the first phase. I'm sorry, until 1926, because in 1926 was the time when the club was actually incorporated. It became Somerset Cricket Club Incorporation. Okay, so it's a very significant milestone. The truth of the matter is, in 1948, the club was built by Workmen, who to this day we recognize and credit Mr. James Horton, who carried out the physical structure in terms of building the club. It was his leadership, along with Mr. Vincent Lee, who was the actual architect. And so in 48, we moved to the current clubhouse where it is today. And since then, I guess the rest is history from a standpoint of sports, the Triple Crown Championships, the cricket, the inviting foreign tours into Bermuda. But perhaps more importantly, I'd like to recognize the fact that Somerset has played a major role with respect to education and developing the people within the community. Today we have over 200 youngsters involved in football and cricket, and so it transcends beyond sports. It's about discipline, it's about respect. It's really about recognizing their potential and what it is that they want to do in life, and so the club is there to assist them in that regard. I think I'll stop there and allow my colleagues to comment.
Thank you. Okay, I am Michael Trott. I'm the president of the Pembroke Chemical Club. Our club originally started in the late 1800s, the same as the Somerset Cricket Club. We were originally a sailing and archery club. That's where you see the logo on you see our archery logo. Then we actually purchased the building right on Front Street, at the visitor center. That's where that was the first club, and then we moved from there to the what I think is the Vasco da Gama Club. And once we purchased where we are now currently at Reed Street, across from the funds. And then in the late 50s, we amalgamated with the Pembroke Rangers and Key West Rangers, Pembroke Juniors and Key West Rangers, and they went to the legislators at the time to get the PAC Act so that we can become incorporated. So by then, those some successful businessmen at the time, were trying to establish themselves, and in the late 70s, we were able to purchase property and work, and so that's where we are today. Our program, again, expands all aspects of the community. Our history, rich history with regards, not so much cricket, but more with football. And we are also triple crown champions. Hopefully, triple crown champions this year too. But like I said, we try to place emphasis more on the community aspect. Trying to get our kids not just through football, but through education, which we utilize with the help of our foundation, which is able to provide scholarships for kids so that they can get off to school and push come shove, professional development. And so that's really, that's PAC in a nutshell. And anything else? I can't think of anything else I can say.
Okay, good evening, everybody. My name is Lorenzo Tucker. I'm the president of Warwick Club. Ironically enough, in November the 5th, we actually celebrated 100 years. So around just prior to 1922, a group of guys would get together, talk about politics, talk about problems in Bermuda. They can't go certain places, and decided to form their own club. Just as a dream, as an idea back then, it was amazing that they stuck together with it, had a building that they started out at Spring Hill, and then we currently moved up to where we are now in 1952. So we decided to take out a mortgage to build the facility up, and that was in 1956, and in just 13 years, paid it off, had a big celebration, but they called it Branding Deeds. And from the jump of our Constitution, we are all about community and helping the fellow man. Our motto is actually for the good of all mankind. So we are strictly into community life and betterment of people. So back in the 50s, when you had to get into certain schools, you had to pay a fee. So the club started an education fund where they would pay the fee for you if you got into the school. And we've continued that type of mantra on as community focused and community based. So to learn about the other clubs is fantastic. I'm glad I'm here tonight, and any questions, I'd like to take them. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. So one thing that's obvious is that these clubs, with their incredibly rich history, are immersed in the experience of community, but also enhancing the quality of community and bettering those who come into contact with the club and in its various programming. So I grew up at St. George's Cricket Club, and I always think about now, and my relationship with the club has changed a lot as I've grown up, and I always think about if I didn't have the club growing up, my sense of community would have been completely different, and my sense of identity will be completely different. And I think it's so important that people acknowledge that wholeheartedly and don't take that for granted, the sense of community and the sense of integrity and the opportunity, that the clubs have provided. That's the first thing I just want to acknowledge. It's something that you all noted. But a bit of a lighter start now. When did each of you first come into contact or first become involved in your clubs? Sorry, did you reach it back? Sorry.
Actually, I started in the club as a cricket player. Had to be a good 20 years ago. And member of the team. I became scorer, and then I got into the executive about 10 years ago. So I've been from playing in the club, becoming a member, and then went executive 10 years ago.
Correct. Did you receive any sort of mentorship in terms of like when you were going into the executive?
Yes, definitely. The guy that brought me in is Mr. John Newsom. He's actually one that guided me and thought I could do some good things later on for the club.
I love it.
And I guess he was right, I'm president right now. So.
This is it.
Yeah.
And for young black men in particular, like
Yeah.
that guidance and that mentorship is something that's essential and it's integral.
Agreed, yeah.
So I've been involved with Somerset Cricket Club 49, 50 years, thereabout. I guess I'm dating my age, but I remember playing community football, even when at that time there was no real junior league per se. Well, they had a junior league, but I think the league was under 18. And so there was no bantam leagues at the time. And so as a result of, I think it was Mr. Lionel Turner and Larry Hunt and some of the senior players coming together, we created a community league. And so hence, that's really where the bantam leagues and mini minor leagues came from. Because shortly after we played the community league, everyone recognized the importance of it. And so we were encouraging other communities to go out and create a similar kind of environment for youth. And so from that stage, 9, 10 years old, we were playing community league. And so that drew me to the club. And so having served in management and worked in a number of capacities in terms of presentations, I was afforded the opportunity of a soccer scholarship through playing football and being recruited by Bermuda's own Keith Tucker overseas. So from a club standpoint, what we did in terms of resources, we did a lot of networking. So coming through, you just didn't slip through the cracks. You were monitored, you were groomed along the way, and then the opportunities were presented to you. And so hence, I'm still here in a capacity as a member, but very much my club here to serve.
They gave me goosebumps a little bit. Because the one thing that, you know, sort of especially as a young Bermudian, there's so many young black men slipping through the cracks.
Yeah.
And it breaks my heart. And I see it's like if there were just more opportunities like that, and people intentionally creating networks and seeing what you're worth and putting you to know that there's a legacy of that in the country,
Sure.
you know.
Well, I think a huge part of that is relationship building. I mean, because, you know, we're young coming through, and I admit, you know, we all had our trials and we did whatever we wanted to do. But there were those males, as well as females, who would pull you aside and say, look, Tankard, you have some potential. We would like to see you training on this night or that night. And so it's about that follow-up. And so, you know, it's this village, as we recognize, and the club plays their role. It's the focal point. It pulls people together. So when we come together, we have to make the effort to be able to reach out to those who are doing not so well, as well as those who are doing well.
Yes, sir. I'm sorry. Forgive me. Mr. Trott.
Okay, I have been around PAC for 50 odd years. I grew up and worked because I just up kind of pass. Been here playing football for them, you know, ever since. I went through all the program from 5 to 25. I was given the opportunity to go abroad to school, and you know, the club was able to assist me in that. Once I got home and, you know, got established, then I was able to start the coaching aspect. That's why I did that with along with my brother. And then once an opportunity came along to assist the club in the more of the administrative side of it, and I let my exposure from the government entities that I was employed with, and then reluctantly I became president of the club. But again, the opportunity was there to, you know, provide my skill set so that I can advance the programs as much as we are doing currently. But that's me in a nutshell.
Thank you, sir. So you know you're meant for leadership when you don't want it, when you're suited for it.
I guess.
How has club life personally benefited each of you?
Okay. Again, for me, I have always been around club life because of my parents. If you know who my parents are, then you know that that's all they did. So once the lights, whenever the lights came on, because we lived at Carver Pass, so once the lights came on, it was like a morph. So we're coming running off the hill as fast as we could because we knew there was something going on at the club. So they protected us once we got down there, because back then the club was built in the area where they had a bar. So in order to get to the playing area with the pools and the table tennis, we had to go through the bar. So they made sure, those gentlemen made sure that we got through that bar as quickly as possible, and they made sure the doors were always locked so that we could play inside and have entertainment for the rest of the night. I spent my life at PAC. Like I said, if you know my father, PAC was not the club for him, but this was a neighborhood. And he didn't want us to go anywhere else. So you go off the hill and you play for PAC. So that was pretty much. And I would say between myself and my brother, my sibling, PAC did a lot for us. It helped us to develop into men. Helped us to understand, give back, and that's what we try to do.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Tankard?
Yeah, I would say similar to President Trott, having gone to the education route, I think the role models for me in the club life, we had many role models. Coming up playing football, success was everything. And so when you went to a national stadium in a cup final, you were looking at certain individuals, you were emulating them. But I think from a psychological standpoint, I benefited from the spirit of the club. When you talk about the will to win, and Dr. Simmons and I talk about it all the time in education, we transfer the desire to win from the football field to everyday life. And so it's about finding a solution and strategy that will allow you to get to success. And so I'm mindful of it almost every day. When you see people, how has the club benefited us? I ask that question. And so sometimes it forces you to reach out, look back at persons who you admire growing up, and just puts you in a space of appreciation to say, hey, thanks a whole lot. Thanks for giving me that direction. So from that standpoint, even today, I'm mindful of those who came before, those whom I see, they may be doing well, not so well. It just helps you to stay focused.
Yes, sir.
The people who help to make the sacrifice.
Yes, sir. The will to win. Wow.
Yeah.
Goodness, I need to write that down. And I mean, it's this perspective of longevity and this perspective of valuing the innate talent and value of the individual. That's like a recurrent theme in everything that all of you have been saying.
Sure.
And to even be able to, I mean, again, for my generation, it's something that we've lost. Being able to look at somebody who's not on the same level as us, so to speak, and we don't hold space for them. We don't go, we still see you. And everything that I heard where you talking about is, we see you, you see me,
sure.
And you carry that with you to this day. And that's such an ethic that deserves to be revisited and deserves to be revitalized. Mr. Tucker.
Yes. For me, basically, it's the people. Like when I came in Workmen Club and became a member, you see all various people of all walks of life in there. And you can learn a lot from a lot of them. And that kind of shaped me to learn something, right? And it was actually enjoyable to come around to the club after hard days where I, have a drink and talk to people about their experiences. And that day, and sometimes you realize, well, your day wasn't as bad as theirs. So, it brings some perspective to it. And they also, as I got into the club life and became part of the executive and part of the, I'm also a head coach of Warwick's cricket team. So to better my education in cricket, they actually sent me on a course and backed me and supported me through the whole process. So the other part that I like about Warwick particularly is the structure and standard.
The bar also had a role to play in the development of young black men because we were sitting at the feet of our older black gentlemen. And a lot of us learned a lot that way.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And I feel like quality discourse, I mean, that's one thing I miss growing. When I was growing up, I grew up in the 90s, and I feel like I got the last bit of the good old days, just like the tail end of it before everything got crazy. And I distinctly remember being around my father and my uncles and his friends. They were drinking, but they went out of control. And the quality of conversation, being near them, and if I ever got near the bottle or near the drink, it was always stay away from it, that's not for you. And then for them to invite me into the conversation was an honor. So the discourse, and I started referring to the discourse around it was great, but now I feel like a lot of young black men, our relationship with alcohol has really changed a lot. And it's excessive, don't know your limit, probably trying to drown some sort of trauma, get over something, and moderation is the word I'm looking for. There's no moderation, and our relationship with it has really changed.
Good evening, everybody. I'm going to add to something that Mr. Payne said, because I keep hearing all this folks about the bar. But like the gentleman on the panel, I came through the club playing sports. And I went on to go into the administration in the club. And as a result of that, I got drawn into the national governing body. And it didn't happen in the bar. It happened in the place where I used to go get my lunch. Because that's where some of the senior football guys, presidents and BFA guys, met and had lunch. And I had gone to a BFA meeting to represent my club. I got up and spoke there. And from them seeing me going to the place to get lunch, one day they told me, look, I think you got something. We need you to come on to the BFA. And I went on to there. So that's my comment. But the question I have is, I've seen the whole aspect of sport evolve in Bermuda, right? Particularly the clubs. And the clubs, over the years, we didn't always have a harmonious relationship with the sports governing bodies, cricket and football, right? And there's other sports that the clubs are involved in. But here recently, something positive has happened. When I say recent, I can't put a time on it, whereby the club presidents came together and formed the club president organization. And I think that, speaking on what Mr. Tank was talking about, looking at different revenue streams and looking at the economic side of it, I think that forum could be the driving force for it. So my question is any of that taking place in the President's Forum at this stage?
Okay, good question. Thank you for that. Right now at the President's Forum, we do conversate on matters with regards to the affiliations with the relevant associations. And most of the presidents, because I think I am a senior president now, and that's 7 years. So that tells you, how those president organization is. So a lot of times I think I'm speaking, when we have those conversations, I'm talking about stuff that happened in the past and how we can get forward in the future, and explaining to some of the presidents, no, this may not be the best course of action for you. This is how we did it, and this might be the best way you can do it. So yeah, we have those type of conversations, but again, like I said, it's still a young organization that's been set up. I think right now the lead is Mr. Sharon Deal, who's the president of North Village, and he's one of the elder statesmen. So we take his advice most times to make sure that we're doing the right thing, so that we can advance all the sports, whether it's football or cricket, and have those conversations. So when we go to those annual conferences, the semi-annuals and the annual BFA association, those things, we make sure that we're speaking as one, instead of making so that we don't have, long debates at those meetings. We have the debates at the president's meetings, so that everyone understands where they're supposed to be heading, what directions they should be heading in.
Yeah, like I said, that sounds like a wonderful idea. I just became president in March, so I'm not a bit a part of this meeting, so I would definitely be interested in joining with it.
Good evening, guys. Congratulations on your presentation, and I congratulate Rajai for doing a great job there as the MC. Congratulations. Let's give him a round of applause. Yeah. And looks like he's done his homework with that book. The Workmen's Club had asked me to speak at I was honored to speak at their 100th anniversary dinner. And you want to see the club, but hey, you guys did a great job. You came into space, you thought you were up Southampton Princess. I'm telling you. So they showed the potential of what can happen. So again, kudos to Workmen for that example. On the book, because I had gotten the book thanks to the library, loaned it to me, thanks Alan. And I had recommended during my speeches that the book become available throughout the island. But it's a limited edition. It's out of print. And so, but we could do some research and find out if we can get it spread about. It came as a result of some serious work. The anthropologist, what's his name again?
Frank E. Manning.
Frank Manning. He stayed down next to St. Philip's. He was staying with the family of the Douglases down there, and he had some space down there. He said he and his wife spent over a year researching the clubs throughout the island. If you can imagine, somebody spending all that time in Bermuda and really doing that fundamental research. So it's a trove of information there that talks about the roots of what Bermuda is. And so that's a source. But he also does a piece, so you gotta search that out there, Rajai, on the bar, which he actually, I brought it up in his speech. I don't know if people really understood what I was saying, but he compared it to, I don't know, it was one of those Greek stories about what happens, the dynamic that goes on the bar, because he and his wife were going around the island, just not all clubs, but they were spending a lot of time analyzing what was happening. And they could see a dynamic happening in that space. There was another thing, the incorporation was that it is a democratic organization whereby the lodges are not democratic. They create like a council, and then the council decides everything. What he recognized was that the democratic nature of the clubs, because they're incorporated, actually was an educational process that allowed the community to become educated about democracy. So these are democratic things that are happening. And so everything's experiential. And so he contends, his thesis is that the clubs help to transform Bermuda, along with the political, the unions, etc. But there was an important part, integral part, in the evolution of Bermuda. And as Mike's saying, is that evolution, and Rajai is saying that evolution has to continue. And so these are resources in the community. The other little thing is that we have to see that, and I recognize that there's a clubs association or president's association, but that there are a lot of organizations in communities that can serve each other, this idea of collaboration. And I think that's a key point right now as we go forward, is collaboration throughout the community.
Sure.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, everyone. Oh, yes, sir, please. I want to give him a proper introduction. Please remind me of Mr. Smith's first name.
Clarence Smith.
This is Mr. Clarence Smith. You are the president, or you're a member, an integral feature.
I'll put it this way. I'm speaking on behalf of what I know about Somerset Bridge Recreation Club, community club, whatever. I joined that club, and I've heard things like about having a bar and all that sort of being natural. When I joined the club, because I always saw the club as
with blowing off steam. The need for this kind of release has become acute in recent years. the spiraling cost of living has forced the average working class black to hold at least 2 jobs. This book was written back in 1970.
I was about to ask you, when was it written?
And it continues, thus it is not surprising that one informant claimed he would have had a nervous breakdown from the pressures of Bermudian life were it not for the outlet provided by the club. Others said that if they had not become involved in the club, they would have left Bermuda and settled abroad. Do you think the club still played that role, and I'm gonna term it catharsis, sort of black people coming together in a space created by black people to experience relief with other black people? Do you still think the clubs play that role?
Yeah, I do, definitely. Because like you said, you come in after a hard day and you got people with like stories, and we all can share and get our steam and maybe even take some advice from them. So yeah, I think we still have it today, for sure.
Got it.
It's still the ethos of the Black Club, but I do believe it's out of control. I think we have to find a way to reel that in. I wanted to say and congratulate President Trott on the program he has at PAC and the fact that, you know, there is no alcohol nowhere near the grounds. I think that's definitely an attractive piece you guys have. I live in Warwick and I drive across there regularly. And to see children participating in the sport without having any access or having to walk through the bar, it's a benefit, and I believe we owe it to our younger people to provide that kind of environment.
Yes, sir.
There's no doubt about it. And so I take my hat off to PAC, and I know every other club don't want to rely on alcohol, but I think, as he pointed out earlier, we have to look at other revenue streams in an effort to control our environment so that our young people are not exposed to the negative element.
I think it's still opportunities for persons of like minds, race, to congregate in those type of environments. But again, I still think there's still an opportunity, because we're going past that point where it's just for black community. I think you have to, you know, at this day and age, you're going to have to incorporate everyone so that make sure that, you know, because everyone brings something different to the table, and that you can learn from someone of a different persuasion, and they bring that, especially in the environment that I work in. I have to take advice from someone else because I need to know how you think, so that I'm able to take what they think and move forward with that. So in this day and age, it's important that, yes, it's still important that we have an area for development, for a place for black people. But at the same time, we have to understand this, you have to move forward and be able to take everyone in as one.
Love it. So definitely the future of the black clubs, even though their history and legacy and foundation may have been rooted in an explicitly white supremacist context, and however, the future of black clubs is inclusivity and opening up to everybody. It's definitely something I've read. So everyone's talked about the bar a bit. So I have this quote that I want to read. It's from chapter 8, The View from the Bar. I laughed really hard. Like I said, I grew up at St. George's Cricket Club, and the games room used to be off just the side of the bar. So you walk into the bar, got the bar, what you did? And I had my first drink. I stole a drink off the bar, and I had my first drink. I've never told my parents this. I was 9.
Really?
I was, and I snuck it off the bar, and they went, yup. Now that didn't translate into a pattern, thankfully. The view from the bar. The club bar may be described as a physical entity and a state of mind. As a physical entity, it is the center of what Lebau, who's an academic, calls effortless sociability. For the 18 hours a day when the club is open, men circulate around the bar, drinking, talking, joking, laughing. One club member, Riley, observed that there are 2 places that can be rarely found in all clubs, the bar and the toilet. Both facilities have obvious functions in the cycle of liquor consumption, which is, of course, the economic and social basis of club life. Regarded as a state of mind, the bar is the symbolic center of the club. The time that an active member spends in the club is spent mainly at the bar, and it is there that he encounters the images, witnesses the actions, and indulges in the behaviors that shape his view of the club itself. Hence, while the game provides a symbolic model for interpreting the life arc and the social polity, and the show furnishes a collection of symbols that convey the themes of black identity, The bar yields a set of symbols in terms of which the clubman construes the club and the varied social roles of its members. Do you have any thoughts on that, in particular that line, the economic and social basis of club life? I think you've all commented in sort of diversifying revenue streams has definitely come up. The fact that PHC, field, and the bar are two very separate things. Yeah, so,
But yes, and historically, that was the function of the Workmen's Club.
Yeah.
There was some place for you to go to have a libation, as you once called it, and so that you can relax and after a hard day's work. But again, in the 70s, 80s, and even 90s, especially at PHC, we used to average 10,000 to 10,000 people per match. And then the type of income that was coming in just from the bar, we were not even talking about the gate, just the bar was significant. But again, that wasn't sustainable because eventually times change, life change, habits change, people get older, grandparents move on, pass on. So that sort of stuff. So then you have to find other means of revenue. And unfortunately, the bar eventually is gonna, you can't keep it open 24/7 as we once did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very good point. Revenue streams. Back when we was trying to pay that mortgage off, we realized we just couldn't rely on the bar itself. So we have 2 restaurants, a barbershop, and they started bingo as well to get the other revenue streams in. And we're always looking for ways to make money outside of the bar. So the key is getting revenue streams in and being less reliant on the bar, in the long run. But the bar is still a big part of it. Yeah.
Understood. Dr. Tankard, any thoughts?
Yeah, it would always be the center point to some degree because of the history and what it represents. But I think for me, it speaks to the transition of moving to the next level, next phase. One of the reasons why the bar continues to be the focal point in many respects is because I believe most of the black clubs have a brain drain from the standpoint that the people who have the knowledge, the people who have the vision, the people who have the energy, many of them seem to take flight. The clubs are kind of on their own. And so you get people who are running the club who will continue to do the traditional things. And so we get stuck in a space of not being able to move out of it. I don't suggest that we get rid of the bar completely. I think, it's there. It serves its purpose. I do believe people will utilize it for its intent, why it was created. But at the same time, it's a level of fortitude. Because remember, you're changing history, right? You're doing some things differently. And people are not quick to buy that. Mm-hmm. And so it requires a bit of conversation, a bit of education, a bit of direction, a proposal where people can see the light in terms of where you really want to go.
I'd like for us to please give our panelists a round of applause. I wish we could continue for another hour. I want to talk about that light. Like, what is the light? What is the future for the clubs now? Because the future seems, promising is cliche, that's not the word I want to use. The future seems dynamic, the future seems full of potential, and the future seems necessary for the clubs, because the country obviously still needs the clubs, not only their legacy, but what they do, and they require the revolution as well. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's a whole nother conversation for another day. I'd love to open up the floor for any questions that anyone may have. No way. What is it?
I don't have a question. I have a comment.
Yes, that's fine.
We talked about the function of the bar as the focal point of the club. But apart from the drinking aspect, I know when I returned to Bermuda back in 1973, I learned a lot from the men who congregated at Young Men's Social Club. I also learned a lot from the men when I got involved with Somerset Bridge. The older folks, the bar was a place to have discussion. We talked politics, we discussed sports, we argued about life. So in addition to the drinking.
Not a building. I saw the club as the people, and that's the way the club functioned. It was the members that were the club. And when I joined was probably 92, 93. I took over from Mr. Sonny Roberts, and there were people before him, of course, lots of people before him, of course, Simmons, Bass, Smith, Rod. I've had people like John here. I remember Tankard saying he came, he played soccer, whatever. But during that time, I found the club to be, and I will go as far as saying, far more productive without a bar, without a building. I mean, we had one of the top softball teams in the country. We had golf teams, we had fishing teams, you name it. It ran on in Somerset Recreation Club without a building. At one time, I tried to we found a problem with, at that time, I tried to get the clubs to come together, because I found out one thing that was happening about, as far as I was concerned, disciplining of the players. We had a problem with a very good sportsman, I won't call his name. He ran on to do very good, but we disciplined him in the club for things he was doing. Next couple of weeks, he was playing for one of the other clubs. I didn't see that as a good thing for what we were trying to do with development of our sportsmen. But in hearing some of the things they've said, since we got a building, you know, we played county, we had junior teams in county, we had junior teams in soccer, and I think in the softball we had the girls teams and male teams. We've done all of it without a building. I don't like to talk about that building because it put so much time getting it there, and then it knocked down. But, you know, the clubs at that time, Workmen's Club in particular, with Mr. Swan, he helped me a lot in saying what should go on. But in order to get the building, and I called it a community club because I called meetings of the community to see what they wanted. And they wanted to see a club built. Well, we had the community to come together and they built the club. You know, now you find that because things have changed, different ideas about how you should run the organization, but Somerset Recreation Club, in my opinion, has done as much and more than many of the other clubs that had so much else to do with what they've gone through in developing and producing youngsters out of some of the top players that Somerset had up there. Bernard and all the rest of them came through Somerset Recreation Club. You know, we had some of the top goalkeepers, top strikers. We had good players, good sportsmen that came through that club. Unfortunately, I had to get out of it. I mean, in '93, that was like.
You say you're 93, Mr. Smith?
Then I joined.
Oh,
hey, well, I joined, and put it this way, I'll give it to you. I'm 30 years ago, I joined, I was. So you knock 30 off for 223, see what you get.
Got it.
So, you know, I put a lot of time in there, and I see people, and I've heard people say we had the people who drank with the senior people. In fact, we had things like what they call the round table derby. People actually get it going now, had Jim Connors, you name it. It went on at White Hill Field. And then you had people, community, and I call them, both of them community workers, irrespective of the politics that went in it. Ralph Marshall and Joe Benavide, who left his equipment up in the area so that we could use it. Didn't charge anything for it because I operated it along with a couple of other people. We had this boy Caesar, Alfonso Caesar had a machine. He left it there. We just operated and built the club. You know, we went on and eventually, with me, I'm involved in a lot of things. Track and field, largely track and field, Pacers Track Club, all those sort of things I've done. But that's another thing with the Pacers Track Club. We started them out running on White Hill Field.
Understood.
Because otherwise we had to go to the National Stadium. So White Hill has been Somerset Recreation Club without a building, and the bar and all that sort of thing, did as much in the development of what went on in that community as any of the other clubs who had clubs. I knew we were rejected from being a part of organization of the incorporation of the clubs or whatever it was, a committee, because we didn't have a club. I got very angry on that because we were doing everything that more than they were doing without a building. You know, I think one of the things that we've done now is start focusing on the building and the club and the bar and those sort of things rather than the community as a whole. You know, to the people, getting them involved, which is what we did at White Hill.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, thank you so much for offering all of that. We were hoping to have him up here with us, but he succumbed to his humility and sat in the audience. But no, thank you so much, Mr. Smith, for sharing all of that. We really appreciate it. It's an integral part of this story.
Good evening, great presentation. Club work is hard work. So how do we get people to come out and participate instead of being spectators, but actually come in and do the work? I think that's why the membership kind of dwindles off, because people want to be served instead of giving service. And if we teach our children that the clubs are assets and that the bar is only a small portion of that big asset, the bar is only a small portion of that big asset, because when you drive across Somerset Cricket Club on a Saturday morning and you see the field full with all those children, I don't even look at the bar. I always look at all those young people that come through all those programs that learn so much in the program. So maybe we need to look at the picture a bit different and take the picture when that field is full with all the children out there playing and stuff like that, and advertise more on what we do, how many children have produced, gotten scholarships. So maybe we need to market all the advantages you get from a club and stop worrying about the bar thing, because at Somerset Cricket Club when I was young, you couldn't go into the bars. So that taught you discipline. You knew what you could and could not do. So I don't think the bar is part of the problem. We just need to teach children, you don't go in there. So I think that what we need to do is so that if you think about keeping that asset for the next generation, then maybe that way we can keep the clubs going, because you want to keep it for, because look how long they've been around and look how many people have gone through that program. And even if those people came back and gave an hour of their time to a club, then clubs can keep going.
Thank you very much. Gentlemen, you have any thoughts?
Yeah, thank you, Karen. Let me underscore that a bit more too, stretch it a bit, because you're right. I mean, clubs really about the programs, right? The building is the edifice, but the program is what develops character, because that's what the clubs do, they develop character. And so I think it's about the programs that we offer that would attract people to the clubs to develop the character. I think this is a new day and time. So naturally, I think if we put those kinds of programs in place, and you're absolutely right in terms of marketing that which we do at our clubs. For the most part, it's word of mouth, right? Or traditional history. Well, you play for Somerset, so you got to play for Somerset. But I think if we have programs across the board, and they may be diversified, you may want to sign your child up to participate in the program. Because I think the bottom line is that we really want to develop character in individuals. That's why the clubs were created. And so whilst we gravitate to the history of the club and our legacy and our lineage, I think the most important part about it is what's the end result? What do we want to get out of it? And if I can speak from a personal standpoint, it's about the character, in terms of what you're learning, what's being offered, how we can participate. And I dare say, I think it's time now that perhaps we need to market it in a way that would make it that much more attractive for people to come back to clubs.
Understood. Thank you for your candor, Dr. Tankard.
Sure.
Anyone else?
No, said it over
Alrighty, thank you everyone.
There's another question.
Ms. Keynes.
I just want to ask about the role of women in these clubs. Do you have women members, and are they full members?
So I'll share with you, yes, Somerset Cricket Club, we do have members. We've had a Somerset Cricket Club Women's Ladies Auxiliary since 1970. And so they've been very active. I want to say that according to my president, Mr. Richard Scott, I think his comment in the paper recently, his interview with TNT, he spoke about black males stepping forward because of the fact that females are doing so much. That's not to discount females, because they're very actively involved. But we recognize that, the role of women in the clubs. And so we want them to continue their role. It's a balance. Certainly, but there's a lot to be done. And so I'm only hoping that we can begin to push on and work with males and females, and recognize that it's important for us as a people to move to the next steps. Next level.
At PHC, the executive is 2 males. Everyone else is females. And
Nice.
I'm just a figurehead. I do this, I'm sure. And we've found that the mothers that bring their kids to the programs, we've identified that, okay, in order to keep them around, we got to get them involved. So, a lot of times they have skill sets that we can utilize. So, so they've got accounting degrees, management degrees, or whatever helps us to advance our programs. So that's the way of getting those ladies into our program so that they can help us to advance and progress the programs of PHC. So.
Right, so at Warwick Club, Warwick was restricted to women, didn't allow women in the club for the longest while. So they created a ladies auxiliary, which wasn't a party club, but it's an organization they had. Since which, and actually 2015, we had our first woman executive. 2015, first woman executive, Carolyn Simmons. And we got about over 35 women members now. And we have a current executive, another female on the board as well. So we're going in the right direction where women is concerned.
Mr. Speaker.
Good evening, John. Good evening, everyone. Before you wrap up, I just want to make a comment rather than a question. And my comment basically centers around that we all should recognize the significance of what our black clubs, our black lodges, done for each and every one of us. We may not have been there during that era, but it was an era when we as black people were being suppressed, and we had to look to ourselves to lift ourselves up. And that's where our black lodges and our black clubs came out of. There were struggles of men who came together and put their own blood, sweat, and tears together to make those things happen. We heard the stories this evening about the clubs were built, not off of big mortgages and stuff, by gentlemen coming together and using their own labor to build clubs, to acquire stuff. But it was all the era that we came out of. And unfortunately, we've forgotten that as a community of people today, that's where our strength came from. And I think it's a message that we as community who understand and know need to make sure we keep passing on and passing on, that our clubs just didn't fall out of the sky because somebody wanted to play sport or somebody wanted to come together, have somewhere to socialize or drink. It came together because it was the only outlet that we had. It was us come together in a time that we were being suppressed and prevented from doing anything else. It was we looked at the clubs are looked at, and our lodges were looked at as empowerment for our people, showing that we can do something, we can accomplish something when everything else is trying to keep us down. And that's a message that needs to always stay alive as we take the community message of what role the clubs played in our communities, what role our lodges played in our communities. Don't never let that be forgotten, particularly from our young members who are coming behind us, because all of us, most of us in this room, our time is ticking in a sense. And we got to make sure that those coming behind us always understand where we were birthed out of and why we were birthed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And before we wrap up, I just want to offer a thought to what the Honorable Speaker said. So currently I'm teaching social studies, and the unit that my kids and I were looking at we looked at the friendly societies. Where I'm teaching at the moment, it's a very discretionary curriculum. I have certain competencies I have to develop, but how I develop those competencies is left to me. And so we were looking at social responsibility and Ubuntu, and I was like, we need to look at the friendly societies. And at the end of a class, took the boys through and everything, and we were looking at the Enterprise landing and all of the incredible things that the friendly societies did. And at the end of a class, I just asked them the question, okay, is the work of the friendly society still relevant? And they all went, of course it is. And I was like, well, what's one thing they can help with? And all of them said, gang violence. So these are 11, 12, 13-year-old young men. And what inspired me is that they were ready. They're like, let's get to work. So it's not, because a lot of people like to say, and I don't think anyone in this room thinks or feels this, that young people are disaffected, or they're disconnected, or they're apathetic. I don't think that's what it is at all. I think that they have not experienced community in the ways that previous generations have. And I also think that's a part of their privilege, because previous generations had to come together. They had that those principles of self-help and mutual aid, it was necessary. Their generational privilege is that it hasn't been as obviously necessary, but it definitely still is, 100%. So yeah, I just wanted to offer that because of wonderful synergy to what the speaker said. This has been more than just sports, definitely more than just sports. Social clubs, their importance to Bermuda's history and future. On our panel this evening, we've had Mr. Michael Trott, president of PHC, Mr. Clarence Smith, member of Somerset Bridge Recreational Club, Dr. Rajai Tankard, member of Somerset Cricket Club, and Mr. Lorenzo Tucker, president of Workmen's Club. Thank you, gentlemen, so much for joining us. My name is Rajai Denbrook again, and I have had the absolute pleasure of acting as this evening's facilitator, and this has been a Bermudian Heartbeats Lecture Series event brought to you by the Department of Culture. Thank you.
Thank you.